Guys, welcome to exception concept. And in exception concept, we will discuss about different strategy to handle the exception in Java. So while talking about exception, what is exception? Exception is nothing but it will define the recovery scenario from the normal flow of execution. If your execution having some kind of error or some kind of exception, which you could have handled at the time of writing, so this kind of things we called as exception handling. So basically exception is two type. One is checked exception and one is unchecked exception, and one is error. So whenever you will unable to handle the any kind if you not give any exception, then if any problem happen in the code, it will throw directly error without handling. So we will define the recovery scenario, and if any block of code have potential uh, to go wrong, so there you can handle uh, exception. So there is something called a checked exception and unchecked exception, and in checked exception, the compiler will tell us that okay, this is where you can go wrong. So it will add its own exception, and when the compiler unable to handle, so if it is runtime exception, if it is runtime any exception come, then it is up to the programmer. They need to handle it, and there is something called error, and which is beyond programmer. It depends on the system. If his memory is not there, so on that time it will give uh, error. So all belongs to parent class, that is nothing but throwable. So let's start one program. So let's take a sample. So we need to start by if compiler will tell us the error, that is nothing but checked exception. So let's throw one exception. So there is IO operation if file is not present. Then if you give in some path, the compiler understood that okay, some file may go wrong. So for that purpose, there is exception called IO exception, and if you give, it will give the error. So that means it is compile time exception. And once you give it, and when you surrounded by try catch block, and this is IO exception, and let's e dot message. If you remove it, not give it. So this is IO exception, and this is handle. And if it is unchecked exception, and let's say it is new, mm, if you throw unchecked exception, so let's arithmetic exception, this is unchecked exception, this is arithmetic exception. Here we are getting error, so we are not getting compile time error because it is unchecked exception. The compiler don't know uh, where the program go wrong. So this is the unchecked exception, and we need to handle it by try catch block. and if you put here, so we got one is checked exception and unchecked exception. So this throw is nothing but it will explicitly throw an exception object. Okay. So let's create our own custom. So own custom we will develop checked exception object as well as unchecked exception object. So the difference between two is that checked exception always extends exception class, and unchecked exception it will always extends runtime exception class. So to confirm it, let's go to that class, and here you can see the extended exception class. If you go to the extend class, then it will extend throwable, and throwable always extend from the object, so it doesn't extend it from anywhere. So this is basically about throwable. From throwable, every exception or error, something like so. All these things will parent is throwable. So let's create our own exception class. So uh, class I it is check. Okay. So now we need to extend it from the exception class. So we need to declare the constructor to pass the message. So in this class we need to declare the proper class. So string message, and again we need to call exception constructor, that is nothing but super message. So again if let's remove it. So again if I throw the exception, this is our custom checked exception. So if I custom checked exception, it will give compile time error. So we need to handle. So JVM knows that has it has potential to go wrong. Okay, so we need to handle it. So let's add try catch block. We dot get message. Now you will get custom checked exception. So let's create one uncheck a custom unchecked exception. I uncheck it. Then we need to extend from runtime exception. So same thing. So we need to declare constructor, and we need to pass any string that. Then we need to call super. So if I declare that unchecked exception, So we need to throw unchecked exception. I unchecked exception. This is custom unchecked exception, and here will not get any compile time error. So programmer have to know whether the code have potential go wrong or not. If compiler knows, it is called checked. If programmer knows, then it is called unchecked. And both don't know, it is called error. So if I compile it, it will throw error, and we need to handle it by try catch. So let's put inside that. So here we dot get message. Now you will get custom checked exception and custom unchecked exception. So this is about checked and unchecked exception. So now we will see about, there is here one potential question will be there. The try catch block, try always followed by multiple catch block, or it may followed by finally. So if I give finally, after catch also I can give finally, and here you can say it will always execute until unless there is some interruption here, like system.get. It is always execute, though exception is there. If I comment it also, it will, though exception is there or not, it will always execute. It is always execute. Finalize will always execute. So now we have seen how to declare custom checked and unchecked exception. So here one question may arise, that what is the difference between final and finalize. So as you know that if there is final is a keyword, final is a block of code, and finalize is a method. And the final keyword is basically used in, if it is used in variable, then its value cannot be changed. If it is given to the method, then it cannot be override. If it is given to the class, then it cannot be extended. And now we have seen that uh, finally block is always execute, where we can clean up activity can be done. And the finalize method is always execute when there is garbage collector will invoke. So let's take one transparent way how this finalize method is works. So to make it work, let's create a method of finalize, public void finalize finalize method is input. So let's create an object, and once we give this null value, then this object is qualified for garbage collection. So let's explicitly call garbage collection system dot garbage collection, and garbage collector, once it is invoked, then we will get finalize method in invoke. Okay, so this is basically about final and finalize and finally. So there is one more concept called, let's delete it. There is one more concept called if the one class get extended to another class at the time of overriding method. Same method signature is present in both parent and child class. Then that is called overriding. And here the exception how it works. Let's see. So let's class parent, and in the parent let's create one method public void get name. Parent method in invoke. Let's make it out of this class. Then let's extend that class. So give the same method signature and now if I give an checked exception in the child, then it will throw an exception. If I throws an exception from the child, then in the parent it will give error. And from the parent, if I give an exception, then child can have that exception or less than that. And the child is always in terms of exception, it is lowest priority and it should be low. The priority for the parent is greater than child. So if I throws an exception, then we have to give same exception in the parent. If I give the parent any exception, then we can give the same exception or we cannot give any exception or we can get less than exception. So let's create an exception over here. Let's throw an exception. Let's throw and check the exception. Hello. So we have throws that exception, but still we are getting error because its parent should it's same or it is equal or parent should be present in the parent function. So parent class function. So here if I throws uh, exception, then the problem will be resolved. Now we need to, this is unreachable code, so let's put in front of that. So in this way, there is if any exception we want to trigger, then in the parent, whatever the exception type will be there, it's less than should be present in the child, or it cannot be more than that. So if I here I can, the parent is always extends exception. So here also I can give exception, that is allowed. And here if in child if I give exception, in parent I cannot give high 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 child exception. So it will give a, so always parent in terms of parent have always parent exception, child always need to have the child exception. So high object is the child of exception, so we cannot put in the parent. So we need to put same or it is greater than that. So we can put like that, or we can throw, let's say, check the exception. So in this way, we can say that parent function, overriding function always have the parent exception, and the child always have the child exception. So it should be always less than the parent level exception. So in this way we can handle it. And there is something called propagation of exception. And here one more thing you can notice, that it is not hold goods for unchecked exception. So if I throw unchecked exception, I unchecked exception, now we can declare throw exception in the parent, it doesn't matter. So unchecked exception, there is no restriction, but in checked exception, the parent should have the parent checked exception, child should have child checked exception. So it is not, this formula is not valid for unchecked exception. So there is something called uh, exception propagation. Let's create another class, sample 2. Okay. So let's create one method, public void a, and public void b. Inside that we will call a this dot a, and again let's create one more function. Then let's make it this dot b. So here main program, and create object, let's give one print statement over here is invoke. So let's invoke C. So it is like propagation. This method is a B method called by C, and A method called by P, and A method is called by no one. So call no one. So in this way it is a propagation. If I throw any exception, let's say unchecked exception, so arithmetic of exception. Then we need to, if you see the programmer, if they want to handle at the time of in C method, we want to handle it by type catch block, and I want to handle B method, and let's give some access. Arithmetic exception is occurred. So now if I print that message, we dot get message. Now if I execute, then it is arithmetic exception is occurred. So that exception we throw in class A, and we got it in class in method C. So in method A we have throws, and method C we have handled that by uh, try catch block. So here we concluded that unchecked exception always propagates by default, or implicitly it will propagate. If you throw uh, checked exception like IO exception, then we need to explicitly throw the exception type or exception class. So here we have handled it by tracker blocks so that it not happen. So if we run it again, IO exception is occurred. So compiler knows that this is the area in which the code have potential to go wrong or going to fail. So in this way, we can propagate checked and unchecked exception, and yeah, so this is basically about exception. So we have learned about uh, what is checked and unchecked exception, what is custom checked and exception, and that there is final, finalize, and finally, and garbage collector we have seen, and we have done example. And after that, the parent and child overriding method, how to handle the exception. And third thing is that I just want to mention that throws and the throw keyword the difference. The throws is always used to declare the, here you can see declare the exception, and the throws keyword is always to explicitly throw an exception. So here any throws, any exception didn't occur. So we triggered one triggered one checked exception, or we can trigger any unchecked exception. So we can say that that is one difference. And yeah, so I hope you got pretty good understanding about exception handling. So please subscribe to my channel, and I will try to make more conceptual videos.